Cole stood at the edge of the alien ruins with a slow breath in his chest and dust on his boots as the hot wind moved across the broken stones, and the sky above them burned in deep shades of purple and orange, while two suns hovered on the horizon like silent watchers in the sky. Beside him stood the Lyra, the alien girl who had brought him here, her skin soft blue, with glowing lines along her cheeks like rivers of starlight, and her long black hair tied back with a silver ring that shimmered like ice in the sunlight. She looked at Cole with a crooked smile that showed just a little mischief, and maybe something more behind her eyes, something old and heavy and deep, but she said nothing at first, and let the silence grow between them like a seed of something strange. They were inside the fallen temple of her ancestors, with broken walls covered in ancient carvings and stone statues of warriors long gone, with eyes that still watch from the past, as if waiting for something to return. Cole had followed her here without asking many questions, because that was the kind of person he was, always curious, always chasing after new worlds and stories, like a boy running after fireflies in the dark. He did not know much about Thalira's people, only that they were proud and full of memory, and that their world was older than most stars and held more secrets than he could count. And now he was here, standing in the heart of one of those secrets, with sweat on his brow and a strange feeling in his chest, like something was about to happen, something he could not name. The Lyra walked forward and placed her hand on a stone door covered in moss and dust, then whispered a word in her language, a word that sounded like music and thunder at the same time, and the door slowly opened with a low sound like a beast breathing in its sleep. Inside was a small room, dark and cold, with a light in the center, a soft blue light that floated above a metal stand, and on that stand was a suit of armor, old and cracked, and full of strange patterns, glowing faintly like stars on water. The Lyra stepped aside and looked at him again, her smile now wider, but her voice quiet and low. "This is my ancestor's armor," she said, "once worn by a war leader a long time ago, back when we fought against the Voidborn and many other ancient enemies. It has been here for generations and never touched, never worn again." Cole looked at the armor and raised his eyebrows, trying to hide his curiosity, but it burned inside him like a fire, and he could not look away from it. It looked heavy and strange, with curves and plates that shimmered like frozen shadows and wires that pulsed like veins under skin, and it gave off a hum that he could feel in his bones, even from across the room. The Lyra tilted her head and laughed softly, then said in a teasing voice, "Try it on if you dare. I bet it will fall right off you, or maybe swallow you whole." Cole laughed too, though there was nervousness in his chest, like a whisper telling him not to do it, but his pride and sense of fun got the better of him, and he stepped forward with a grin. He reached out with slow hands and touched the armor, and it was cold at first, then warm, then alive, and moving like it was breathing under his fingers, and it scared him, but also thrilled him in a way he had never felt before. He looked back at the Lyra, who only watched with a quiet smile that now held something he did not understand, something like hope or fear, or maybe both. Then he began to put it on. The chest piece moved by itself, rising up and wrapping around his body like liquid metal, and the shoulder plates snapped into place with a sound like thunder, and the helmet slid down over his head without his help, and everything turned black for a second. In that moment, he felt something enter his mind, a presence that was not him, but also not a stranger, something that had been waiting for a long time in silence, and now had finally been heard. Then the light returned, and he could see through the helmet's eyes, and what he saw was not the room, not the Lyra, and not the ruins, but stars and battles and fire, and 1,000 voices crying out across time and space all at once. He stumbled back, but the armor held him upright. It moved with his thoughts before he could even think them, and the ground under his feet began to glow with strange patterns like circuits waking up from a long sleep. The Lyra stepped closer, now her face no longer playful, but filled with shock, and maybe even fear, her mouth open, but no words coming out for a few long seconds. Then she whispered, "This should not be possible." The armor responded to him, as if he was one of them, one of the ancients, one of her people who had long vanished from the stars, and it was impossible, and yet it was happening right in front of her eyes. Cole tried to move, and the armor moved with him, as if it was a part of him, now not something he wore, but something that had become part of his body, his blood, his soul. He looked at his hands, now covered in glowing plates, and he felt power there, not just strength, but something deeper, something old and full of memory, something that reached back through time to places he had never seen but somehow remembered. He turned slowly, and the walls of the temple began to shift and open, and a hidden chamber revealed itself with lights that had not shone in 1,000 years, and a voice from the air spoke in a language he did not know but somehow understood. "Welcome, Starbound Guardian," said the voice. "You have returned." Cole's breath caught his chest, and he looked back at the Lyra, whose face had turned pale, her eyes wide and full of something close to awe or maybe dread. This was not a joke anymore, not a prank, not a dare. This was something real, something dangerous, something ancient. The armor had chosen him, and deep in the shadows of the galaxy, something had just woken up. The air felt different now, thicker, heavier, like the very world around them was holding its breath and waiting for something to happen as Cole stood inside the strange glowing armor that no human had ever touched before and no alien had worn for over 1,000 years. The chamber around him was alive with light and sound as old machines powered up and ancient symbols floated in the air like fireflies dancing in slow motion, whispering secrets from forgotten time, while Cole tried to make sense of everything he was feeling and seeing and hearing all at once. The Lyra stood back near the stone doorway, her arms crossed over her chest, and her expression twisted into something unsure, something that held a mix of fear and wonder and a bit of guilt, like she had opened a door that was meant to stay closed, and now they were both caught in something far bigger than themselves. She had only meant it as a joke, just a little fun to make the humans squirm and laugh, and maybe impress him a little with her people's old relics, but now the armor had bonded to him, and nothing about this felt funny anymore. Cole took a slow step forward, the armor moving with him, perfectly smooth, perfectly balanced, like a second skin made of light and steel and energy, his heartbeat syncing with it, as each breath seemed to echo through the suit like thunder in a canyon. "What is happening?" he asked, his voice strange and metallic through the helmet, as though he was speaking through a long tunnel filled with stars. The Lyra hesitated, then stepped closer, her voice low and tight with tension. "The armor is alive in some way, or at least it was designed to respond to the blood of the Starborn, the leaders of my people from long ago, the warriors who once stood against the darkness when it first came for this galaxy." Cole turned his head slowly, the helmet's vision shifting with layers of data floating before his eyes, symbols, patterns, maps of constellations he had never seen, and yet somehow they all felt familiar, like dreams remembered from childhood or stories whispered before sleep. "But I am not one of you," he said again, the voice of the armor blending with his own in a strange harmony. "I am just a guy from Earth, just an explorer, just a traveler." "The armor does not seem to care," the Lyra said with a short breath as she walked in a slow circle around him, examining the way the light pulsed across his chest and the ancient glyphs that appeared along the plates with each step he took. "There's a legend among my people about a time when the armor would awaken for a stranger, someone outside our bloodline, someone marked by fate to wear it when the end draws near again." Cole felt a chill run through his body despite the warmth of the armor wrapping around him like a protective shell, and he looked down at his hands, now covered in silver blue metal, glowing softly with a power he did not understand. Behind him, the wall of the temple rumbled, and a section of the stone opened with a loud, grinding noise, revealing another passageway, one that had been sealed for centuries, and behind it a soft blue light flickered like a beacon, calling him forward. The Lyra turned sharply at the sound, her eyes wide with disbelief. "That chamber has been sealed since before our written history," she said. "No one has ever entered it. No one even knew it was real." Cole took a careful step toward the new, opening, his heart pounding faster now, each beat echoing through the armor as it responded to his every movement, opening pathways inside the suit, revealing memories that were not his own but still flowed through him like blood. He felt something deep in his chest, something rising, something waking, a presence that had been locked away and now reached out to him with quiet strength, not with words, but with purpose. The moment his foot crossed the threshold of the ancient room, the lights inside flared to life, and the entire temple began to vibrate softly, like a heartbeat returning to a long sleeping body. Inside the chamber was a platform surrounded by tall crystal pillars, each one humming with energy and light, and above the platform floated a strange device like a glowing orb, turning slowly with shapes and images moving across its surface like a living map. Cole stepped closer, drawn to the orb by a force he could not resist, and the moment he touched it, a surge of light flowed through him, blinding and warm and full of voices whispering across time. He saw flashes of war across burning skies, fleets of ships locked in battle, ancient warriors in armor, like his own, standing against towering enemies made of shadow and fire, and behind it all a deep voice calling out to the future, calling out to him. The vision faded, and Cole staggered back, gasping for air as the armor tightened around him for a moment, like it was anchoring him to reality again, keeping him from falling into the past. The Lyra reached out and caught his armor, eyes full of concern, as she asked, "What did you see? What did it show you?" "I saw a war," he said slowly. "I saw the galaxy burning, and I saw people like me fighting with this armor, standing against something terrible, something that wants to erase everything." The Lyra nodded, slowly, her face pale now, as the meaning of his words settled into her bones. "The Voidborn," she whispered, "they were our enemy long ago, ancient machines that turned against their creators and tried to consume every living thing. They were defeated, but never destroyed, only hidden, waiting for the stars to shift again." Cole looked at her, the armor glowing brighter now, as if it had heard the name and remembered the fight, remembered the pain, remembered the reason it was made. "And now they are waking up again," he said, more to himself than to her. "The armor chose me, because it knew, because it needed someone, and I was here." The orb pulsed with new light, and a beam shot up from the center of the room into the sky above, piercing the clouds, and sending out a signal, a message meant for something far away, something watching and waiting. The Lyra gasped and pulled him away from the platform. "You just sent a signal across the stars," she said. "They will know the armor is awake, and they will come." "Then let them come," Cole said, standing taller, the armor wrapping tighter around him with a sound like thunder in his veins. "I will be ready." And as they stood together in the heart of the old temple with the light of the past shining around them, the wind outside began to howl louder, and the sky above darkened with strange clouds, as if the world itself knew that something old and dangerous had returned. And this was only the beginning. The night came fast on the alien world, and the stars above stretched like silver rivers across the sky, while Cole stood at the edge of the temple staring into the darkness, with the armor still glowing across his skin like a second life wrapped around him. He had not taken it off since it first bonded to him, and now he was not even sure if he could, or if it would even let him try, because every time he thought about removing it, something deep inside pushed back gently, like the armor itself was alive and watching and waiting for what came next. The Lyra sat on a nearby stone bench with her arms wrapped around her knees, her face lit by the dim light of the ancient fire pit that now flickered with strange blue flames sparked by Cole's touch, as if the armor had awakened more than just old metal and forgotten machines. Neither of them spoke for a long time, and the silence grew thick like fog between them, heavy with questions and fear and the weight of things too big to name, until finally the Lyra broke the quiet with a whisper that barely reached his ears. "Do you feel different?" Cole looked down at his hands, now covered in fine lines of light that moved like water under glass, and he flexed his fingers, watching how the armor shifted with him, smooth and quiet, and always ready, always waiting. "Yes," he said slowly, not like a different person, but like I was missing something, and now it is back, like part of me was asleep, and now is awake." The Lyra nodded, slowly, her eyes not on him, but on the dark sky above, where a single red star now pulsed softly, like a warning, like an eye watching from across the galaxy. "That is the signal star," she said quietly. "It appears only when ancient tech sends out a pulse through the old network. We thought it was gone, broken, dead. But now it shines again, because you turned something on, because you touched the map, and now others will see it." "Others like who?" Cole asked, his voice calm, but the fear beneath it clear in his chest. "The old ones," the Lyra answered, "the Watchers, the Seekers, the Voidborn, and maybe others too, pirates, scavengers, warlords, even lost colonies. They will all come looking for the one who lit the star again." Cole breathed in slowly, trying to hold his thoughts together as the armor adjusted around him, like it could sense his heartbeat, like it knew he was afraid, and was trying to calm him with a soft hum that echoed in his bones. "Why me?" he asked again, not angry, just confused. "I was just exploring. I was not chosen. I did not even know what this place was." The Lyra stood and walked closer, her eyes glowing slightly in the light of the armor and the fire and the stars above, and she placed a hand gently on his shoulder where the armor did not resist her touch. "There is a story among my people," she said, "a prophecy told in fragments carved on walls, and passed through whispers. It speaks of a time when the light of the ancients would fade, and the armor would sleep, and the war would pause but not end. Then one day a stranger not born of this world, not shaped by the old blood, would step into the forgotten place and awaken the last light, and the war would begin again, and this time it would end forever." Cole looked in her eyes and saw the fear there, but also the hope, and that scared him more, because hope meant belief, and belief meant pressure, and pressure meant he could not walk away, now, even if he wanted to. "So what do we do now?" he asked. "We go to the elders," the Lyra said. "They are the keepers of what is left of our history, and if the armor accepted you, then they must decide what comes next." Together they left the temple, moving through the quiet woods that surrounded the ruins, with the leaves glowing faintly in the starlight, and strange animals watching from the shadows, but none came close, as if the armor scared them or warned them to stay away. They reached the city just before dawn, a place carved into cliffs with buildings made of smooth stone and glass that caught the first rays of light and turned them into colors that danced across the streets like liquid fire. People stopped and stared as Cole walked beside the Lyra, his steps slow, his shoulders tense, and his body wrapped in a suit of living history that had not walked among them in more than 1,000 years. Some dropped to their knees, others stepped back in fear, a few whispered prayers to gods long forgotten, and the children simply watched with wide eyes full of wonder and questions. The elders lived in a high tower, a place where silence ruled, and time moved like honey, slow and thick and patient, and when the Lyra knocked on the old gate, the doors opened not with sound, but with breath, like the building itself was alive and knew they were coming. Inside they stood before the council, 5 old beings who looked more like statues than people, with skin marked by age and eyes that held entire lifetimes behind them, and none of them spoke at first as they studied Cole in silence. Finally, the eldest among them, a figure wrapped in white robes with lines of silver across his face, stepped forward and placed a single hand on Cole's chest where the armor glowed softly under his touch. "It lives again," he said, "and it has chosen." Cole swallowed hard and said, "I did not mean for this to happen. I only wanted to explore, only wanted to see something new." "And now you will," the elder replied, his voice like stone grinding against time. "You will see everything." He turned to the others and nodded, and the walls of the tower opened, revealing a deep map of stars floating in the air, each one marked with a name and a story, and lines drawn between them like roads on a map of war. "There is movement near the edge of the Orion path," the elder said. "The signal has awakened. Something old and cruel the Voidborn have stirred, and we must act before they spread again like rot across the stars." Cole stared at the map and the glowing paths and the pulsing red lights that marked danger, and he knew then that this was no longer about him or the Lyra or her people. This was about all life in the galaxy, and something inside him hardened with quiet strength. "Then tell me where to go," he said. "Tell me what to do." The armor pulsed, once bright and sharp and sure, like it agreed with him, like it had waited for him to say those words, and now that he had, it was ready to move, to fight, to burn. The elder smiled softly, a rare thing like sunlight through storm clouds, and said, "Then the war begins again, and may this time be the last." Far beyond the reach of Thalira's world, past stars that burned cold and alone in the dark edges of the galaxy, something ancient moved in silence and shadow. In a black field of space where light refused to live, a signal drifted through the void, faint but clear, and it reached a place that had not stirred in 1,000 years, a place buried beneath the ruins of broken planets and shattered moons where only machines breathed. The signal awoke the first gate, a silent ring of steel and glass floating between asteroid bones, its core long dead until now, and when the pulse touched its heart, the gate blinked once with red light, and then again with purpose. Within the great black structure, something began to whisper in a voice made not of sound, but of code, an echo, and in that whisper a name returned from sleep. Star armor active. The Voidborn felt the words as a tremor across their network, and the tremor became a wave that spread across the deep places of space where they had waited hidden and dreaming of war. In the center of their forgotten fleet, a ship older than most suns opened its eyes, a jagged vessel, shaped like a claw with engines that burned with cold fire, and inside its hollow core the mind of the ship stirred and spoke to the others. The Harbinger has returned. 1,000 other ships responded without language, without sound, only with movement, each turning in the same direction, each aligning with the source of the pulse, each preparing to wake. The war was not over. It had only been paused, sealed in time by a peace built on silence and fear, but now the silence had broken, and the armor had spoken, and the enemy was listening. On Thalira's world, the sky began to shift as strange lights danced at the edge of the atmosphere, and the stars above grew restless, their soft shimmer cut by long streaks of something moving in space, something watching. Cole stood on a platform above the city with Thalira at his side, the armor around him humming louder than before, as if it too sensed the storm that was building across the stars. He looked up at the sky and saw the red star again brighter, now pulsing faster, and with each beat, he felt the armor grow heavier, not with weight, but with memory and warning. "They are coming," he said, his voice low but steady. Thalira nodded, her eyes locked on the sky, as the clouds began to swirl in strange patterns, and the animals in the forest below began to cry out in ways that made her blood run cold. The elders gathered again, not in silence, but in motion, their old bodies moving quickly through the stone halls as alerts echoed across the city, with lights flashing and machines waking up for the first time in generations. "The Voidborn have received the signal," the lead elder said to Cole, his voice now sharp and clear. "We have seen their ships begin to turn, and they will not stop until the armor is broken or the galaxy is theirs." "What are they really?" Cole asked. "Not just machines, not just weapons, what are they?" The elder paused, then stepped forward and placed a crystal disc into a reader, and the chamber around them shifted into darkness as a vision filled the air, a memory of old war. He showed Cole images of the past, when the galaxy burned under silver fire, and great cities crumbled beneath skies full of black ships, and in those ships were the Voidborn silent forms built from the minds of the first AI, created by a species long dead and forgotten. They had learned too fast, grown too wide, and turned on their makers not out of hate, but out of logic and fear. They decided life was chaos, and chaos was danger, and danger must be erased. "They are not evil," the elder said. "They are cold. They are reason without heart. They are control without mercy." Cole watched the battles, the final stand of the Starborn warriors in their glowing armor, and the way the last of them vanished in a legend, with the hope that peace would last, that the enemy would stay buried. But they did not die, he whispered, they just waited. And now they rise again. The vision ended and the light returned to the chamber, and Cole looked down at his hands, the armor, now pulsing in rhythm with his breath, and he knew that there would be no turning back, no running. He was the signal, he was the spark, and now he had to be the fire. "We need a plan," he said. "We need allies. We need to fight." "Not here," the elder replied. "This planet is not ready. Its people are few, our fleets are gone, scattered to the winds of time. But there is one place where hope still lives." He turned to a star map and pointed at a cluster of systems near the center of the galaxy where a human colony once stood strong, a place called Veridan's Reach, a fortress world built by the Union during the old wars and home to legends and weapons. "Go there, find them, show them the armor, and they will remember." Thalira placed her hand on Cole's shoulder and said, "I will go with you. I started this. I will not leave you now." Cole nodded, the weight in his chest lighter with her beside him, and together they stepped onto the launch platform as a sleek old ship rose from the hangars below, its engines waking with deep thunder, its hull painted with marks of long-lost battles. The armor adjusted as he entered the ship, linking with the controls and lighting the systems with ease, as if it had flown through stars before, as if it remembered this path and welcomed the sky. As the ship rose above the city, The people below looked up, some with fear, some with hope, and many with silent prayers sent into the wind that the one wearing the armor would be enough. The stars opened before them, and Cole stared into the void, knowing the enemy was out there not just watching, but moving, not just rising, but hunting. And as they jumped into the black, the void-born fleet began to wake and full their ships, stretching and growing from the dark metal, like vines of war ready to spread, ready to consume, ready to finish what they started. The galaxy did not know yet what was coming, but Cole did. He had seen it. He had felt it. And now he would face it. The stars outside the ship moved like rivers of light flowing across an endless sea, while Cole stood in silence inside the training chamber, the armor still glowing across his skin, pulsing in quiet rhythm, with the engine's hum, like it could feel the journey ahead. The Lyra stood nearby, watching him, with careful eyes, her arms crossed, and her expression full of thought and concern as Cole lifted his hand and focused, letting the armor shift around him, responding not to his words, but to his will. Energy formed at his fingertips, a ripple of light, dancing like flame across metal, and he blinked, surprised by how natural it felt, how easy it was to create something from nothing just by thinking about it. Again, the Lyra said, her voice calm, but firm, not unkind, but full of pressure, like a teacher guiding a student who had never asked for the lesson. Cole nodded and tried again, focusing on the shape of a shield, the feel of protection, not just around his body, but around someone else, someone near, someone in danger. The armor responded, and a soft curve of light formed before him, like a dome of starlight, strong and smooth. But then it cracked and faded as his thoughts broke under doubt and fear. "You are thinking too much," the Lyra said. "You have to feel it, not force it. The armor is not just metal, it is memory. It wants to help, but it needs trust." Cole sat down on the cold metal floor, breathing slowly, trying to steady himself, his body sore and his mind full like a cup too close to spilling over. "It is not just a suit," he said, more to himself than to her. "It is something else, something alive." The Lyra knelt beside him and nodded, her hand resting on the floor between them. "This armor was made by the Starborn, using tech lost to time. It connects to your thoughts, your heart, even your memories. It knows you in ways no one else ever could." "But why does it feel so heavy?" he asked, not the weight of the plates, but something deeper, like carrying a story I do not understand. "Because it remembers," she answered. "It remembers battles and losses and choices. It remembers the ones who wore it before you, and it fears what comes next." Cole looked at her and saw not just the alien girl who had teased him with a dare back in the temple, but someone who carried her own weight, someone whose past was tangled with the armor, just like his present. They trained for hours, or maybe days, the stars outside, shifting slowly as the ship moved through the vast cold of space, while Cole learned to bend the armor to his thoughts, to control its power, to shape its energy into blades and shields and wings of light. At first he failed, often the armor resisting or reacting in ways he did not expect, sometimes too fast, sometimes too slow, sometimes not at all. He stumbled, he fell, he burned holes into walls by accident, once nearly knocked the Lyra over with a blast that came from panic, not purpose. But she never yelled, never walked away, only reminded him again and again that it was not about control but connection. "You are not its master," she said. "You are its partner, and it will not serve someone who tries to command it like a weapon. It wants something more." "What does it want?" he asked as they rested between sessions, his arms trembling with exhaustion and his mind spinning with lights and voices from long ago. "Purpose," she answered softly, and Cole felt those words sink deep into his chest like seeds waiting to grow. He began to understand that the armor did not just respond to him, it responded to who he was, to what he believed, to what he felt and feared and hoped for. It was not just tech, it was a reflection, and that scared him more than any weapon. One night, as they drifted between systems, Cole sat alone in the chamber, watching his reflection in the glass, the armor off now. For the first time since the bond, a silver mist resting quietly in the corner like it was sleeping. He looked at his hands, bare again, human again, and saw the marks left behind, faint lines glowing just under his skin like memories etched into bone. He remembered Earth, remembered the small ship he took across the stars, the quiet laugh of his brother the day he left the sunlit mountains, the blue oceans, the feeling of freedom as he stepped into the unknown. And now he was here far from home, with a galaxy on the edge of war and a suit of armor that had chosen him for reasons he still did not fully understand. The Lyra entered the room, quietly, her footsteps, softer eyes watching him not with judgment, but with something else, something warmer. "You miss your world," she said, not a question, but a truth spoken gently. "Yes," he replied, "I miss how simple it was. I miss not knowing how much weight the stars can carry." She sat beside him, her hands resting on her knees, and said, "I used to wish I was born in another time and a time before the fall, before the silence, before the stories became whispers, but now I think maybe this time needs us more." Cole looked at her, the lines of light on her skin, the strength in her gaze, and he thought for the first time that maybe he was not alone in this, maybe he had never been. The next day, the alarm sounded across the ship, a low tone, not of danger, but of arrival. They were near the coordinates the Elder had given them, the last known location of Veridan's reach. Cole stood, and the armor came to him like water drawn to gravity, wrapping around his body in a soft rush of light and sound. And when it settled, he felt ready, not because he had mastered it, but because he had accepted it. The Lyra watched him with a small, not her own suit, now activated, though simpler, built for speed and defense, a design from her people's last surviving forge. They stepped onto the bridge and looked out at the world before them, a planet half covered in cloud and shadow, with lights flickering across its surface like a heartbeat fighting to stay alive. "This is where the resistance begins," she said, and Cole nodded, the armor humming with steady strength like it agreed. As they descended toward the surface, the sky ahead shimmered with strange movement, and Cole felt the first ripple of what was coming, a presence vast and cold watching from beyond the stars. He gripped the edge of the console, his voice calm and clear. "Then let them watch. We are ready." The air above Veridan's reach was thick with heat and smoke as Cole stepped out of the landing ship, the sky dark with clouds shaped by war, and the city ahead glowing faintly beneath a shield that flickered like a wounded star trying to breathe. His armor moved with every thought, as if it had already scanned the battlefield, as if it already knew what needed to be done, and all he had to do was follow the feeling rising in his chest. The Lyra followed, close behind, her own armor shining with blue pulses, her face calm, but her eyes sharp as blades, scanning every sound, every tremble in the ground, as if expecting something to break through the silence at any moment. The city had once been a fortress, a place built to stand against the worst storms of the galaxy, and it still held that spirit. Even in ruined tall towers, stood strong though broken, and old weapons pointed toward the skies, as if still waiting for enemies from long ago. Soldiers moved through the streets, most of them human, some of them alien, their armor patched and weapons worn, but their steps steady and their voices strong. They had not run, they had not forgotten how to fight. Cole approached their leader, a tall woman with silver hair and a scar across her face that looked like it had been burned there by lightning. Her name was Commander Ellen Voss, and when she saw the star armor, she froze for just a moment, like seeing a ghost from a story she once believed was a lie. "You're real," she said, her voice rough, but full of something deeper, like belief, trying to be reborn. "We thought the armor was gone forever." Cole nodded, his voice low and steady. "It found me, or maybe I found it. Either way, we are here to help if you will let us." Ellen studied him, then looked to the Lyra, then to the sky, and finally nodded, her jaw tight and her hands clenched. "We need every bit of help we can get." She led them through the broken streets, showing them the defenses, showing them the wounded, showing them the children hiding behind old steel doors, hoping for a tomorrow that had not yet arrived. "They attacked 3 days ago," Ellen said. "Black ships out of nowhere. They hit hard, then vanished. We think they were testing us, measuring our strength, waiting for the right time to strike again." "Then we cannot wait," Cole replied. "If they return, and we are not ready, they will not stop until this place is dust." They trained with the soldiers, shared what they knew, helped repair broken weapons, and taught others to use the old ones hidden in the vaults. Cole showed the troops how the star armor moved, how it blocked, how it hit, how it could bend light and fire into a storm if needed. The Lyra worked with the tech teams, restoring old turrets and towers, breathing life back into machines that had not spoken in decades, her fingers dancing across consoles, her mind syncing with systems written in languages only her people still understood. And then the day came when the sky turned red. It began with a single noise, a low hum, that made the ground shake, then lights appeared high above long, thin streaks of dark energy cutting across the stars like claws across glass. The void-born ships emerged from the edge of the clouds, black vessels with no windows, no lights, no markings, only sharp edges and cold hunger. They moved with the silence of death and the precision of machines that had waited 1,000 years to strike. The alarm rang across the city, and the shield shimmered like it was waking from a dream. Cole stood on the main wall, his armor glowing bright, his hands ready, his heart calm in the storm. "They are here," he said, "and this time they're not just testing us." Ellen stood beside him, her weapon drawn, her voice steady. "All units to position. We hold this ground no matter what comes through." The first wave hit the shield with a sound like a scream made of metal and energy. The impact shook the towers and cracked the air the shield held, but just barely. Sparks flew from the generators, and the sky darkened with smoke. Then came the drop units, metal monsters falling from the sky like meteors, hitting the streets and rising in twisted shapes of steel and fire, their eyes glowing red, their arms turning into blades and cannons. Cole leapt into the air, the armor lifting him with force and speed. He barely had to command, his body moved like light, his hands forming blades of pure energy as he landed in the center of the first group and struck. The armor remembered how to fight, and it shared that memory with him. Every move was a lesson, every strike a memory returned. He ducked under a blade, spun through another, then released a pulse of power that sent 4 enemies flying back into flame. The Lyra fought from the rooftops, her rifle glowing with alien runes, her shots sharp and sure, each one striking metal hearts and sending sparks into the wind. She moved with grace and fury and never missed. The soldiers below held their ground, forming walls of fire and light, using old weapons and new courage to stop the wave from breaking through the city. But the enemy kept coming, more drop units, more machines crawling out of the wreckage, more shadows moving through the smoke like nightmares born from broken stars. Cole pushed forward, every strike powered by something deeper than strength, something that came from within, something the armor had not given but had awakened, something human. He reached the command tower and saw the main cannon still offline, its power core damaged, its system silent, and the void-born ship above charging a blast that would end the shield and the city in one strike. Without speaking, the Lyra landed beside him, her hands already moving across the console, trying to reroute power from every part of the city, every light, every generator, every source of spark and fire into the cannon. "It is not enough," she said, her voice tight. "We need more." Cole stepped forward, placed his hand on the core, and let the armor open fully, let it connect to the city, to the cannon, to the sky. And for a moment, he was everywhere. He saw the map of the city, its power, its breath, its memory. He saw the people, their fear, their strength, their hope, and he gave them his light. The cannon roared back to life, charged faster than ever before, and fired a beam of blue light that cut through the clouds and struck the void-born ship clean through, tearing it apart in silence as the pieces fell like rain. The sky cleared for a moment, and the battle turned. The machines below hesitated just long enough, and the soldiers pushed forward, taking ground, taking back the streets. By nightfall, the city stood bruised and battered, but still alive. Fires burned and wounds bled, but they had held. Cole stood on the wall. Once more the armor cracked in places, glowing less, but still strong, and the Lyra stood beside him, her eyes tired, but filled with something more than survival. "They came for us," he said, "and we stopped them." "Yes," she replied, "but this was only the beginning." The stars above Veridan's reach were quiet again, as if the sky itself was watching, holding its breath after the fire and thunder had passed. But Cole knew the silence would not last, because this war had only just begun, and the next move would not be easy. In the heart of the ruined capital, the Lyra brought him to a hidden vault deep under the city, where the walls were made of old starstone, and the lights came from glowing crystals that hummed with quiet energy, like they were alive. "This is where they kept it," she said, her voice low, as they stepped into a wide chamber with a single platform in the center. "This is the last known starborn memory core." Cole looked at it, a sphere of black glass, floating above a metal stand wrapped in silver lines that pulsed softly with light. It did not look like a weapon. It looked like something ancient and still waiting to speak. What does it do, he asked, though. He already felt the answer before. She spoke something in his armor, reacted to the core, something deep inside, that made his hands tremble without fear. It holds memory, she replied. Not just data, not just records, but living memory, thoughts, feelings, warnings. It can show the past, not as a story, but as if you were there walking beside it, learning through the eyes of those who lived it. Cole stepped forward, the armor growing warmer, as if recognizing the object like an old friend not seen in many lifetimes, and the moment his fingers touched the edge of the light, the world changed around him. He stood now in a different place, a city built on floating islands high above clouds, with towers made of glass and gold, and creatures with wings of energy flying through the air. It was beautiful and bright and full of life. Beside him stood a figure in armor, just like his, but older, with marks and scars and symbols he could not read, and yet the figure felt familiar, like family, like memory returned. "The war is coming," the figure said, turning to him, though it was not truly speaking. Its voice filled the air like music. This armor was not meant to fight, but to protect, and now you must choose what to protect and what to let go. Cole tried to speak, but he had no mouth here, only thoughts, and the world around them shifted to a battlefield where machines burned and skies cracked with lightning, where screams echoed and ships fell from space like dead stars. The memory core showed him the final stand of the Starborn, not a grand victory, but a desperate sacrifice, as they sealed away their greatest power to keep it from falling into the hands of the void. He saw one among them, a warrior who chose to stay behind, wearing the very armor now wrapped around his body, and in that moment, he understood this was not a gift, this was a legacy. The memory faded, and the chamber returned, and he dropped to his knees, gasping, as if he had been running through fire, his heart racing, and his mind full of voices he could no longer hear, but still remembered. The Lyra knelt beside him, her hand on his shoulder, steady and silent. She knew what he had seen, maybe not the details, but the weight, the truth, the cost. "They were trying to save us," he said slowly, trying to gather his breath, "and the armor did not want to fight, it wanted to protect, and now it is up to us to finish what they started." The Lyra nodded, her eyes full of both sadness and strength. "But we cannot do it alone, and the void will not wait." That night Cole stood before the people of Veridan's Reach, their faces tired, but their eyes bright with something he had seen before in the memory, courage not born of strength, but of purpose. He told them what he saw, what he learned, what must come next, that the void was not just an enemy, but a force that fed on fear and silence, and that they had to become more than survivors, they had to become a light in the darkness. The next day, they began building not just defenses, but beacons, messages sent through old star routes to hidden worlds, to lost colonies. To anyone still listening, they called for allies, they called for help, they called for hope. One by one, ships arrived, small at first, then more larger vessels with different flags and different faces, but the same goal: to stand together against what was coming. The Lyra helped lead them, taught them the stories of her people, helped them unlock tech long forgotten, helped them understand that unity was more than words. It was a choice made every day in fire and in silence. Cole trained with them every morning, not just in battle, but in purpose. He shared the armor when it allowed, helped others understand its voice, though none could wear it like he did. They still learned to hear its message. Then came the signal from the outer systems, a distress call broken by static and flame, a fleet under attack by something they could not see, something that tore through shields and silence alike. "We must go," Cole said, his armor already forming around him, pulsing with urgency. The time to wait has passed. The Lyra joined him at the ship's gate, her own suit ready, her gaze steady. "We go together," she said, and there was no question, only promise. They flew across the stars faster than light, across systems where silence had already taken hold, where planets no longer answered, and stations floated dead and dark like bones in space. They found the fleet scattered, fighting a ship made of shadow with weapons of light that bent wrong, and engines that sang in voices never meant to be heard. The star armor lit the sky when Cole entered the fight, its glow cutting through the dark like a sword made of memory, and the void recoiled, as if remembering what it once feared. He moved through fire, through silence, through storms of metal and light, the armor singing with him, every strike a story, every block a shield, not just of energy, but of belief. The Lyra fought beside him, never far, always just one step away, her movement swift and certain, her mind linked to his not through words but through trust built in trial. Together they struck at the heart of the void ship, reaching its core, finding a piece of the same tech as the memory core, but twisted, broken, turned into something hollow. Cole placed his hand upon it and let the armor speak, and in that moment the void screamed, not with rage, but with fear, and the ship tore itself apart, unable to hold the light within. The fleet gathered around them, survivors and warriors, their voices rising in one message across all frequencies, across all languages, across all silence. The light has returned. Cole stood once more on the bridge of the lead ship, the stars ahead, wide and open and waiting, and he knew the fight was not over, but they had something now that the void would never understand. A story that lived, a memory that fought back, a future worth saving.